A new client sits down across from me and she's done everything right. She's ran the numbers, she's been a Bolden subscriber for a long time, and she's modeled out every scenario. And she looks at her plan and she tells me, this is the plan I have, but it's not the plan that I want. Because her net worth in retirement does what almost every super savers does. It goes up and to the right for 30 years. She ends her life with more money than she started retirement with. She doesn't exactly want to die with zero. That feels a bit extreme, but she also doesn't want to accumulate forever either. Well, shouldn't there be something in between? Well, there is. It's a shape. It's actually two shapes, and almost nobody ever asks for them by name because nobody's ever drawn them out before. So today I'm going to draw them out for you. 4 shapes that your retirement can take. 2 of them, most super savers end up with by default, and 2 of them are actually what people want to execute on once they see the plan. Plus the one shape that you want to know if you've got an inheritance coming your way someday. If you're new to the channel, my name is Benjamin Brandt. I've been a financial advisor for almost 20 years, and I want to help you have an even better retirement. So let's start with the map. Your net worth can take one of basically 4 shapes, and they happen to look like 4 letters. We've got an R, an N, a V, and an L. Now, the first 2 are the ones that people generally arrive with at our offices, and the second 2 are the ones that we build on purpose. So let's start with the R. The R-shaped retirement climbs the entire way. You retire with $2 million, and 30 years later, your net worth is higher than your last day of work, right? It just keeps going up. Now, if you spend 40 years saving, a line that goes up might look like winning, but a net worth that rises for your entire retirement means that you died with money that you traded your healthiest years to accumulate. You outsaved your own life. Then there's the N. An N-shaped retirement climbs for most of retirement and then tips over ever so slightly right at the very end. Usually that's the byproduct of a pension that doesn't inflate as quickly as your expenses go up every year. Your pension doesn't quite keep up, so later in life that line finally bends over. But here's the thing about both the R and the N. In both cases, you end your life with far more than you started with. And here's the part that I want you to hear. Nobody chooses this on purpose. This isn't a real plan, in my opinion. It's the byproduct of being a super saver. It's what happens after 40 years of saving when nobody taught you how to spend or how to enjoy spending your money. You retire and maybe you just reach for something off the shelf like the 4% rule, or maybe you decide to just spend the dividends, or I'm just going to take the RMDs, those required distributions, and not anymore. Or maybe I'm just going to live off of the interest. And then this R-shaped retirement kind of falls out of that by accident. You didn't decide to die with millions of dollars. You decided to be careful, and well, careful compounds for 30 years, and we have more than when we started retirement. Now, you might be thinking, well, that's not me. I'll spend it down when I get there. Well, let me show you the data, because that's one of the most consistent things in all of retirement research. In fact, there's a study from the TIAA Institute that tracked real retirees for years after age 65. Not a simulation or a spreadsheet, actual people with actual accounts. And here's what they found. 4 out of every 10 retirees had more money at age 72 than they had at 65. More money, 7 years into retirement, after 7 years of supposedly and at least attempting to spend down their net worth. And it gets more pointed for people who watch this channel, super savers. The wealthier you are, the slower you spend. The top quartile of retirees held on to about 71% of their wealth, and the second quartile, slightly less wealthy, held on to 55% of their wealth. So the people with the most money spend the smallest share of that money. If you're a super saver, you are the single most likely person in the room to underspend their portfolio. And there's a second study, this one from Blanchett and Fink, published just last year, and they looked at how much retirees actually withdraw from their portfolio annually. Would you believe the average 65-year-old couple pulled just 2% per year from their portfolio? Single retirees was even less, about 1.9% of their portfolio every year. The famous rule that everybody quotes is the 4% rule. Well, real retirees in retirement are actually spending half of that. So this idea that you'll naturally loosen up when the time comes and you'll spend the money, well, the data really says the opposite. Left to our own devices, super savers just keep super saving. Now, before we get into how to fix this, I wanted to point out my newsletter. It's called This Week in Retirement, where I find the best retirement content on the internet and I zap it into your inbox. It's free, and I think it'll save you a lot of time and help you have an even better retirement. The link is in the description, or you can visit thisweekinretirement.com, or you can just scan this magic code. All right, so why does this happen, and why is it different for people watching this video right now than it was for their parents? Well, I've got a theory, and it starts a generation back. So if your parents retired 20 or 30 years ago, they were careful in a way with money that was very special and ran very deep, because they were raised by people who lived through the Great Depression. They grew up around stories of people who lost everything, who literally ran out. So they saved, not towards a vision of the life that they wanted, but away from the fear of the life that they were terrified of, which is a totally rational thing to do. When you've seen real people lose the farm, so to speak, That has an impact and an imprint on your brain. And there's something else that people forget. When your parents retired, modern retirement planning kind of barely existed. The 4% rule, which is the first real research-backed answer to how much can I actually spend per year in retirement, well, that actually wasn't published until 1994. A financial planner named Bill Bangen wrote it in the Journal of Financial Planning. 4 years later, in 1998, 3 professors at Trinity University reevaluated and confirmed it. That's actually, you sometimes hear the 4% rule referred to as the Trinity study. That's where the name comes from, Trinity University. But here's the part that matters. Neither one of those studies was headline news. It wasn't on traditional news. They lived in professional financial journals. They didn't reach ordinary, real retirees or near retirees for another 15 years or so. It wasn't really until blogs and forum and eventually podcasts and YouTube spent a decade or a decade and a half talking about it. So when your parents retired, the answer to how much can I spend, it really didn't exist yet, or at the very least, the research hadn't reached them yet. The best available advice was just save as much as you can and hope for the best. Basically, only spend from your savings in absolute emergencies. Now look where you are. If you're Gen X or you're a younger boomer, you've basically had a 401k your entire career. You've had retirement podcasts for 10 or 15 years and blogs. You've had channels like this one for 4 or 5 years. Essentially, many super savers woke up in their 40s. They realized, I've got a real portfolio on my hands, and you had to go somewhere to learn what to do with it. That's the generational shift. It's not that your parents weren't smart. It's that the knowledge existed for decades before it was ever accessible to them. You have tools that they didn't have, basically. Which means for the first time, this is the shift. You get to save towards the retirement that you want instead of what your parents probably did was away from the fear that they had. But there's a catch. And this is the real reason that I think people underspend. There are only really 2 ways to fail at retirement. One is you run out of money. And the second failure is that you die with your biggest dreams unfulfilled. And that could be trips that you never took, or gifts that you never gave, or time unspent with loved ones that you just kept postponing. You die with regret. And here's the trap. The fear that keeps you up at night is number 1, running out of money. But if you're a super saver, the data that we just looked at says the real risk of running out of money is at or near 0. You have very little risk of running out of money, but you do have a high risk of dying with regret. That unspent money in your portfolio is untapped potential. And in my experience, in reality, you can't give yourself permission to spend until you've made that first fear go away, that fear of running out of money. That's what a good financial plan does. That's what a good retirement plan does first. It builds contingencies. That could mean, I'm worried about long-term care. How do we plan for that? I'm worried about the market going down. How do we plan for that? Do I have enough guaranteed income to meet a minimum dignity floor, right? That fear of running out of money has to be off the table before we give ourselves permission to really spend it, right? And really focus on what I feel is the bigger failure that we should be concerned about, and that's dying with regret. And that regret has a clock on it. Your retirement might last 30 years, but your healthy, high-functioning years, your health span is likely a lot shorter than that. There's a well-documented pattern in retirement research called the retirement spending smile. People spend more early, less in the middle, and that as they slow down, and then it ticks back up later on in life when we're often spending more money on healthcare at the end of our retirement, at the end of our lives. That's the whole argument for front loading. The money is worth more to you now in your go-go years than it will be in your no-go years. Not from a financial standpoint, but from an experiential standpoint. Personally, I firmly believe that an extra $10,000 of fun money at age 60 is infinitely more valuable than an extra $10,000 at age 85 or 95. So let's talk about how to fix it. The first retirement shape to fix this is the V. A V-shaped retirement is pretty simple. You spend down hard in the early years, in your go-go years, and you let your net worth fall. This phase might last 10-ish or 15-ish years. Then Social Security turns on, which reduces the monthly draws from your portfolio. And maybe you also naturally slow down a little bit. Then your portfolio starts climbing back up. After Social Security is turned on, the expected return on your portfolio then will exceed your withdrawal rate and your net worth starts building again. So if we picture this, you retire at 60 with $2 million, you front load your spending. Maybe that's travel or experiences with family members or just time with the people that you care about while everybody's still healthy. And we go from $2 million, we draw it down to, let's say, $750,000. Then at 67 or 70, we've got maybe 2 Social Security benefits turned on and your withdrawal need drops significantly. And then that $750,000 mark that we targeted, that starts growing again. Your net worth makes a V. You spend the most when you could enjoy it the most, and you never came close to running out of money because that recovery was built into the plan from day one. It was your safety catch. You're not being reckless. You're fulfilling the contract that you made with your younger self when you saved up all this money in the first place. So that's the V. The second shape is the L, and this one's a little bit more aggressive, but for the right person, I think it can really change everything about your retirement. An L-shaped retirement is spending down to a predetermined floor and then holding flat. So you draw your portfolio down over the first 10 or 15 years, now down to a number that you've decided in advance is your comfort level, and then you stop the decline. You hold that line then for the rest of your life. Now, the floor is the whole game. It's not a random number. It's built out of guaranteed income and safety. For many people, that looks like a paid-for house, maybe 1 or 2 optimized Social Security benefits, maybe a pension, and your portfolio floor, which is generally made up of a Roth IRA that we've built over time, doing careful strategic Roth conversions. So there very likely are no required distributions, and it's probably going to pass on to your kids largely tax-free, depending on brokerage account versus IRA versus Roth. In this example, we're talking mostly Roth. But here's what makes it work. Your guaranteed income has to clear your minimum lifestyle, your maintenance spending, the number that you would genuinely be fine at forever. In fact, I was modeling this out with a gentleman very recently, and we added up his guaranteed income, what we thought it would be in the future, 2 Social Security checks and a pension. And he looked at that number and he said, well, that actually covers my minimum lifestyle requirements, right? That covers a life that I'd be pretty comfortable with forever, no matter what. So everything above that floor became available to pull forward. So his number specifically was 500,000, and we were going to make sure that we had converted at least that amount into a Roth at that point. And everything above that, then we were able to front load into his early retirement. So we planned on taking him from $2 million down to 500,000. That's going to be that L, spend down to the floor and then flatten out, knowing that the floor alone covers a retirement that he'd be happy with. Now, here's a situation where this L becomes almost magic, and that's an inheritance that you know is coming, but you don't know when it's coming. And this comes up all the time. Super savers tend to raise super savers, of course. And a client will be telling me about their family, and then it comes out, right? My mom is 89 years old. She's got money, and we've been begging her to spend it for years. And she kind of says the same thing every time. I'm saving it for a rainy day. I want you kids to have it when I'm gone, or I'm saving it in case I need care in a nursing home someday. She's saving it for an undefined, indefinite goal. She's just kind of accumulating forever. Out of that same depression era fear, just passed down one more generation. And the client will tell me, well, I don't want to plan for that inheritance. I don't want to count on it. I don't want to just pretend it doesn't exist. And while that instinct really is classic super saver mentality, plan for the most conservative outcome, even when you know that it's really, really likely there's going to be some money coming in at some point in your plan. But here's the thing. You don't have to choose between counting on it and ignoring it completely. There's a third option, and that's that L. So you build a plan that decumulates you down to a floor that's survivable forever, with or without that inheritance that's going to maybe come or maybe not. Remember that L is genuinely going to have a portfolio floor of a large Roth IRA, plus a paid-for house, plus a large or an optimized Social Security benefit, maybe a pension. But in essence, it's a life that you'd be comfortable with no matter what. Then when the inheritance does come at a time that we just can't predict, it doesn't rescue a broken plan or build surpluses on top of surpluses. It lands on top of a decumulation plan that we already have in place because we've built it on purpose. It fills the bottom of your L back in. So we spend down to an L, and then maybe the L lasts for 1 or 2 or 10 years, and then we get an inheritance, and our L becomes a V. Well, now there's room for even more, right? Even more experiences, maybe more giving, gifts to your kids while it still changes their lives. Maybe now we can loop in nieces and nephews. Maybe we give more to the charitable causes that we care about. You didn't wait to live until the inheritance came, and you didn't bet all of your retirement money on a situation that might not never arrive, right? You gave it room in your plan without depending on it. Now, I know all of the objections. What if mom needs nursing home money and the nursing home takes all of the money? What if her estate plan changes and I'm not the beneficiary anymore? Well, that's exactly why you build a plan with a floor. If you counted on that inheritance, well, that scenario where the nursing home takes all the money, that's going to leave you financially wrecked. But you didn't. You planned for a floor, and the floor stands on its own. So if that money never comes, you're fine. And if the money does come, well, it's pure upside. That's the entire point of building an L-shaped retirement. So those are the 4 shapes, the R and the N. That's what most people sort of fall into by accident or by default. And then there's the V and the L. Those are the kind of plans we build on purpose for a purpose, so that you can spend your money what can actually buy you a better life. Now, if you want to see what your shape actually looks like, your real numbers with your real Social Security and your actual floor, well, that's exactly what we build with our Retire Ready Blueprint. We'll map out your net worth over your whole retirement, and we'll find out whether you're headed for an R or an N, and we'll show you what your V or your L-shaped retirement could look like instead. There's a link in the description, and you can book a call and see if it's a good fit for you. Because at the end of the day, the goal is to never die with the most money. You very rarely see a U-Haul pulled behind a hearse. The goal was to build an even better retirement. Thanks for watching.